Hello, so today in this video we will be discussing how to find an equation for cosine and sine. Read like this, given a function. So first let's begin by reviewing what a function looks like for a regular cosine x curve. And so we see here y is equal to cosine x that we start at 1, we come down to 0, we go to -1, 0, and 1. And so we have this nice U-shaped curve for our first cycle. For sine of x, we start at 0, go to 1, back to 0, -1, back to 0 again. So we have this nice backwards S-shaped curve for our first cycle. And so now if it gives us a function that looks like this, and it asks us specifically, find when y is equal to a times sine of b times x minus h plus k, then we can evaluate this function. It could also ask us to find the function for cosine. But in this case, let's look at sine. And I'll note those differences as we go through this video. So first, we will begin by solving for a. And here a is amplitude. So step number 1 is find amplitude. And then the way we find amplitude is we take the y max minus the y min and divide by 2. And so if we look at this graph here, we have a y max at this point and this point. And so I'll go ahead and label that. And we have a y min at this point and also this point. And we can look at the difference between these 2 points and it's going to remain the same. It's going to be this distance right here. So if I think about this being my line that all my y mins hit, and this being my line that all y max hit, I want to find the line in between those two. So I'm going to call that my midline. And so if I go up 1 for my minimum and go down 1 for my maximum, and go down another 1 for my maximum, and likewise another 1 up for my minimum, then I find that my midline is right there. So our amplitude then is this difference. How much up we go from our midline to our maximum, or how much down do we go from our midline to our minimum. Alright, so the next step of this problem is going to be finding k. So let me replace a in orange so it's easier to view. Now we're going to find k, so I'm going to mark that in our blue for step number 2. So 2 is going to be find our vertical shift, our midline. So this is how much up or down we move. And so here, k is going to be equal to a y max minus a, which is also going to be a y min plus a. And so here we really did the work. This midline is this line right here that we found to find our amplitude. Okay. Notice that so far we haven't really had to take into consideration that we're finding a sine curve. Our amplitude and our vertical shift is going to be the same across cosine and sine. The part that varies is how we find h. So h here is our horizontal shift. So step 3, find horizontal shift. And this is our left, our right shift. And so now we have to take into consideration, where are we starting for a sine curve? So generally with our sine curve, again, we start at 0 and we go up to 1. And so if we look at this graph, if we look to the left, we start at 0 here, but we decrease. And if we look to the right, we see that we start at 0 and we increase. And remind ourselves that with a sine x function, we always want to start by increasing. So this should really be our starting point. And so a horizontal shift is this distance here. So if you can imagine taking a sine x curve and picking it up and moving it over to the right, we'll end up here. In the same way with our vertical shift, if we imagine picking up this curve and moving it up one, we end up at the same starting point. And that is where our 1 came from, 1 unit for this one. So now let's differentiate between sine x and cosine x for this problem. So sine x, we find that value where x value of the positive slope crosses the midline. And we saw that here. There's a positive slope, and this is where it hits that midline. So for cosine x, it's where the x value reaches its first maximum. All right. The one variable we're left with is b. So step number 4 is going to be find frequency. And that is what b stands for, frequency. We have this nice equation that we will apply for this problem. So it's 2 pi divided by the period. And we remind ourselves that period is the difference in x between 2 troughs, which we call our minimums, or 2 peaks. And I'm sorry, you cannot see that right now, so let me move that up. Okay, I think I have it all on the page there. And so here, to find our period, we're going to look between 2 minimums, 2 troughs, and it's this distance right here. And then we can also say it's the same distance as going between our two maximums. These are the same. Notice that this distance here is also the distance between two of our midline points, but it's after one cycle occurs. So it wouldn't be between this midpoint and this midpoint. It would have to be between this midpoint and this midpoint because that's a full cycle. And so that's it for this lesson. In the next video, we will practice a problem. But these are the basics on how to find amplitude, your left or right shift, your up or down shift, and your frequency. I hope this helps. Have a good day.